Next guest joining us this very morning. Good morning, listeners and viewers, and the wonderful Jalf is back.
Good morning, Ammar. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just trying to find our script, is what I am.
Well, I'm
And
definitely going to be in the queue for some free biryani. They didn't tell us we were looking.
yeah,
I would have
biryani.
been
What?
there.
Where is
I
it?
would have been
What is
there
it?
now. I don't know. It's somewhere on the Westgate Road. But if it's free, I'll be there.
Yeah. Someone was saying about our noise not being as clear as it, or noise, probably is noise, but the sound not being as loud as it could or should be. But I'm checking my mic levels and they're fine. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you perfectly well.
Yeah, I can hear you as well. Yeah, I'm trying to, as I say, desperately find the radio script for our show. But anyway, whilst we're looking for that, um, but you're listening to Ammar and
Jalf.
live on our weekly radio show right here on Spice FM.
And each week we'll try and bring some views, news, and one or two clues from the business world.
Yeah. Asian Business Connections aims to connect, support, and promote the Asian and wider communities.
And we'll be talking shop quite literally, not just corner shops where they look to start a business. Where you have a business and you want to talk business, we can help.
Can't help. We can't help. And we do help. Gosh, Jeff, where you been?
It feels as though it's been a long time, but I was there last week, wasn't I?
No.
Yeah, I was. We did the show last week. Come on, you're talking about the week before I was missing.
Where were you last week?
Last week we did the show.
What did we talk about? Oh, of course we did. We had Mark on. Sorry, yeah, it was the week before. I didn't obviously get the chance to say where you were. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? Gosh, it's end of February or coming up to the end of February.
Crazy, isn't it? 2 months has gone off this year, Ammar.
It's
unbelievable.
Crazy, Jack, is what it is. It's absolutely crazy. Anyway, yeah, Mark was. It's nice to have Mark on the show. I think. He's a good.
Mark's a bag of knowledge.
He's a good guy. He really likes you and enjoys coming on, and we get like a real honesty and authenticity from him, don't we? Is what we get, which I think is always good. The headlines this week. Gosh, there's so I think generally what everyone was talking about was the House of Commons debate, Jeff, and the change more broadly in the way that the world is now, including America, responding to the crisis in Palestine and Israel. So it's took sort of 30,000 deaths, a couple of million people being displaced for people to go start saying, I don't think this is right, or that we need to stop this from escalating. But I don't know how many lives have to be lost before you decide or not whether genocide is taking place or not. But what's incredibly telling and so sad is I don't know the ins and outs, but the speaker allowed for three parties to put forward their motions the Scottish National Party, who had brought forward a motion, and then Labour, and then the government. And because he allowed that to happen, it was, oh, he's biased and he's sided and he's done all of these type of things. And it was like, so rather than looking at, are people dying, it almost feels as if we're now looking at um, whether somebody was biased or not. And I just feel as if we get distracted with all of the wrong things.
Wow. I think it's all deliberate. I think, honestly, what's happening in the world at the moment in Gaza, it's absolutely horrifying. And you know what's worse more? As a human being, when you're seeing all of these families and children just killed, and the world leaders, they're having so much debate over it, and the Americans are still vetoing ceasefires just a couple of days ago. So they're vetoing the possibility for peace based on political agendas. And I think humanity is lost when the world leaders, they're the ones that, unfortunately, the public, you can have demonstrations and you can have your opinion, but that doesn't make any difference at all, because the public's not in a position to make any change unless every single person goes out on the streets. But generally, it's the governments, the trusted governments, that are supposed to make decisions for the betterment of humanity. And I just can't understand that there's so much there's so much collision over making a right decision, and there's so many political scenarios that they have to consider before just saying that no, there needs to be ceasefire, there can't be any further war, you must cease fire, stop the killing, but they can't do it. And I think even if there was a ceasefire, I mean, if you're politically aligned with Israel and you're one of the powers and you control the propaganda, the media, and A, B, C, and D, they can do what they want anyway, because who's going to bring them to International Criminal Court, because they don't really have any power neither. So unfortunately, the double standards of the world are just absolutely horrendous, and it's very, very sad, and it's heartbreaking that we can't do anything to help our fellow human beings not go to their deaths. It's very, very sad.
It is. So that was, and it rightly continues to lead a lot of the news stories more broadly. But it's mad, isn't it? Because lots of I mean, some of the news, there's individuals handing back their awards and recognition. I think Catherine Hamnett
Yeah,
handed back her CBE,
mm.
because of the response from the UK, and these aren't people who are religiously orientated. This isn't about, am I supporting Islam or Judaism? This is just simply humanity. And at the end of the day, whether humans live or not.
It's got
And
nothing
in
to do.
particular, defenseless, sort of less, hopeless individuals. I was watching some of the news, doctors saying, don't know why they're doing this to the hospitals. And then IDF allegedly showing, well, there were some medicines here for someone and whatever else. But yeah, it's just crazy state of affairs. And hopefully something can become of it quite soon, especially because regardless of your religious influences or beliefs or persuasion, the holy month of Ramadan is starting on the 10th of March, and it would simply be horrific if there was not a ceasefire prior to that to ensure some stability for all of those individuals who are living in abject poverty, starving to death, not getting any of the care and the attention they need. It's crazy. Is that it is?
Mhm. Yes, it's very, very sad. Very, very sad. And I was just listening to the news just before we came on Spice FM. Obviously, the other big um, war that's happening is obviously the Russians in Ukraine, and that's been ongoing now for what? Is it 2 years or is it a year more? I think it's 2 years,
Oh,
isn't
no,
it?
yeah, it's coming on for coming up to a couple of years now. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? The way of
And
life.
it's horrendous for that country, Ukraine.
Mm.
How so many people have moved out, and the future is so gloomy for that entire nation. And whilst our Western leaders keep on saying, they were saying, oh yeah, we've introduced these sanctions and it's going to have a real big impact on the ability to make weapons. Um, I don't know what impact it's gonna have on Russia making weapons, because I'm pretty sure the parts and the materials that they need, they're going to be able to get them from um, the countries that are not being sanctioned with, and I think that's not going to stop the number of weapons. Wouldn't you have thought after all this time they would want to sit on the negotiating table and negotiate and come to some kind of a agreement to stop that war as well? And I don't know if you saw the interview with Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin, but it was
Sorry,
one of the
with
most
who? Who?
Tucker Carlson, like a very famous journalist. I mean, he went to the Kremlin to interview Vladimir Putin, and he's
Right.
like a very, very famous journalist. And I think it's had like I don't know, like 400 or 500 million views. The only person I don't think has viewed it is yourself. Um, but I mean, but the things that he was coming up with, Ammar, and the questions that he was asking, what was just a different take on what we hear on the media, our media, every single day, and it was very interesting to hear the other side. Um, and I think those that haven't seen it, they should have a look just to get a understanding of what the Kremlin think of it all, and their whole position is that, well, if we're surrounded by NATO forces, which was part of our Minsk agreement when the USSR was breaking down, and it was a clear, crystal clear agreement. NATO is not going to expand. Now NATO's on our borders, and we just can't allow that. And America wouldn't allow that, and we wouldn't allow it. So why would they allow it? So isn't that kind of logical to understand their perspective and think, okay, well, we understand because we wouldn't allow it. So okay, we understand that you're not going to allow it, and you're also a superpower. In fact, you've got the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world. So I think it's quite logical if they're saying that we don't want NATO.
Well, I just think there's a whole element of, because you're talking about the impact on Ukraine, right? And one of the things I was looking at, have we got something like 300,000 people from Ukraine?
Possibly.
Yeah, I'm sure, which is, understandably, that there's a war going on. We want to and need to protect others and ensure safety in the event of such a significant crisis. So providing safety and security for children and mothers in particular is a moral obligation on us, regardless of wherever. But I suppose the challenge I have with that approach is why are the lives of certain people not the same as or as valued as others, Jeff? That's and if you compare that to So the UK had very little, if anything, to do with, you know, Ukraine and the impact of why and how all of these people were affected in it, and actually this is Russian invasion of Ukraine is what it was, and whatever the background of it, it is. But if you look at places like Afghanistan, if you look at places like Iraq, if you look at places where there has and have been significant intervention, significant as in going in to destroy communities, destroy entities, and whatever else, destroy the country. And then as they're leaving, all of these people who have supported them locally because they thought they were doing the right thing are left out to dry. As in the Taliban. So this is not religion, whatever your views are, and this isn't about religious views. But if, and I'm not saying this at all, but if this original suggestion was the Taliban, who have historically lived there, tribal, have their ways of life, live the way that they live, and we should respect and appreciate that. If the Taliban was so bad, right, that goes in and and we try to destroy the Taliban, we dissect the Taliban, realize that no one historically has ever been able to do this, so neither could the UK and the US. But during which point in time, I wouldn't say forced, but certainly encouraged lots of individuals and organizations to sign up to our cause, westernizing that community and society, changing people's beliefs and behaviors. And lots of these translators, lots of these individuals worked for the UK and the US governments. And then you go, oh, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. So let's leave. So then we leave. And one of these people who understandably may have felt a bit liberated or forced to go back to a way of life that they'd been told was wrong for so long. Right? And then all of those people, whether they were directly or indirectly supporting the UK and the US, are saying, well, you took a side, didn't you? And understandably want their pound of flesh. Whether I agree with that is right or wrong. Was there, and is there not a moral obligation on us to actually support those people more so than others? And should we not be offering similar type of support to the people of Palestine, who, I mean, God forbid anyone suffering from poverty, but you can say with some level of certainty that in Ukraine, whilst they've been bombed, the hospitals are still there, people are still getting fed, there's still places to go, there's support there, they've got billions of pounds worth of aid. They've got billions of pounds worth of aid to fund the army and fund the government and everything else. Palestine, has that nothing?
Well, the infrastructure that was in place was it not the UCAS or something, which was the UN
University.
that used to help feed the Palestinians. They then stopped.
UNRWA.
Yeah, I think something. They stopped it, didn't they? They stopped allowing that to be used as a tool to give them the aid, which is just outrageous. I mean, Ammar, the some of the things that are being done is absolutely inhumane, and unfortunately, it's the governments that are the ones that are making these decisions, regardless of which governments they are. And I think that's just absolutely tragic. Just very quickly on the whole Taliban thing, we went into a war against Taliban Was that not because of 9/11? So the accusers of 9/11 were the Saudis. They said that it was the Saudis, but then we go, or the Americans go and start a war against the Afghanis to try and find Osama bin Laden, which was never in, he wasn't in Afghanistan, supposedly. He was apparently on the border of Pakistan somewhere, or they found him in Pakistan eventually. But then you're going looking for one man and you're destroying the entire country for 20 years. You want to go and change the regime from the Taliban, and 20 years later, who's in charge again? So you spend 20 years at war with the Taliban to change them, and then you leave and the Taliban is still in power. So what have we actually achieved? Apart from death and destruction, because the same government is back in power that was prior to the 20-year war, which is a bit of an irony, really. And in amongst all of that, as you've just mentioned, the loss of life, the money, A, B, C, and D has just been horrendous. But as you also said, Afghanistan is one of the countries that has never been defeated. And they say that it's never going to be able to be defeated. The
No, it
British,
can't be. I mean, look,
Russians,
if Russia, and regardless of your view on Russia, if Russia was unable to do it, if countries prior to that, if historically there was an alliance, the Afghans actually came into India, and and India had extended all the way to Afghanistan. It could never get past or through Afghanistan, and in fact, it was considered a strategic partner in that Silk Route, that existed between China into Turkey and then into Europe. So all of these, historic trade routes were undoubtedly, there for a particular reason. It's the same reason anyone would struggle going to war with China, regardless of however you would think so, right? It's one of those places and spaces, similar to Russia. I mean, gosh, if this, and God forbid, ever spilt out, and now there was allegations of Ukraine being a proxy war, and if you're giving it a 60-70 billion pound, then it possibly becomes a bit of a proxy war, because you're propping it up and you're funding it and you're supplying all of this. So even with all of the supplies, and even with all of the munitions, and even with all of the support, um, it's still struggling. So,
well,
so there are these strategically placed entities that take up vast land base and vast numbers of individuals that exist geopolitically, that
mhm.
are out there, and Russia and China and places like that. And on a smaller scale, you've got the likes of places like Afghanistan,
Well,
as well.
you've got
Anyway,
North Korea. I mean, like you said, these are huge countries. Our policy should be to sit around the table, have have our differences, but able to work together for the benefit of all humanity and the world. And the powers, they really need to get their act together and get around that table, because if things escalate more, then there's gonna be so much. It's gonna affect. I mean, at the moment, it's affecting a particular area, Ukraine, Palestine, but who's to say that things couldn't escalate into that region? Things can just escalate in that region, and then it could escalate all over the world. And all of a sudden,
and we are at risk of this escalating, right? Is what we are. So,
and very quickly, Omar, even at this stage of the wars that are going on, even Rishi Sunak has come out and said, "Oh well, yeah, we need to we need to help the Ukrainians, stand with the Ukrainians, because the Russia's, because of their invasion, the electric prices have gone up, the gas prices have gone up." Yes, they have, and we're the ones that are suffering. And that's not even.
Even there should be a focus on the impact on us all in regards to inflation and all of those type of things. Thanks, Lou. Um, and the impact of broader economic and geopolitical um, activities. However, I think it's wrong to suggest that it's purely the basis of these the prices have been going up anyway. They've been going up for such a long time because of all of the subsidies, because of all of the investments in alternative energy schemes that simply didn't work, and sort of poorly thought through policy. So those that impact already exists. In fact, looking other news, the energy bill is to fall because the price cap's coming down in April, right? So while caps have fallen, standing charges are going up. So energy providers are allowed to start charging more for their daily standing charges that they just say we're going to charge this per unit. But in April, energy bills are suggested to go down, um, but they're still too high. Um, is that purely because of Russia? I mean, no, I don't think it is. And statistically, if you do appropriate research, you'll see a number of other influences. I mean, fundamentally, we should never have shut down or decommissioned our nuclear plants, right? So we're now desperate to recommission them. So these type of policy changes, knee-jerk reactions, when you then realize that actually, nuclear energy is probably one of the most efficient and effective power sources. So we're now sort of going, oh my gosh, we've decommissioned these, and we now need small nuclear reactors and things like that. Some of the other policies that exist and have existed are influencing costs more broadly. So there's a whole range of influences, John. Um, and I suppose other things more broadly. So the recession, apparently we're in a recession, but inflation's still increasing. I mean, gosh, mortgages. So lots of people are now coming off those fixed term mortgage rates, Jeff,
Hmm.
and it's crazy the difference in um, an increase.
Yeah.
So yeah, do you? And here's the challenge, because even just 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, so the beginning of the year, economically speaking, right, the forecast was a reduction in interest rates. So if I use the example of Santander, right, they've got a number of products online, and their 1 year fixed is round about 5.27%, but their tracker is 0.24%, right? So 0.24% above base Bank of England um, interest rate, which is currently 5.25%. So it makes it 5.49, right? So you can either have a 1 year tracker where 1 year fixed, where exactly what you're going to pay, right? And if I was a betting man, I would have said at the beginning of the year, I would take the tracker because the interest rates are going to go down because they were forecasted to go down. But in reality, a recession's happened and inflation hasn't gone down as much as they anticipated. And a lot of the policies. So last month was one of the biggest months for the government surplus. so how much they make, and there was billions of pounds made by the government on taxes, obviously, right? Because they're just increasing those, but not as much as they had anticipated, which is really interesting. So you've got all of these factors. The reason why I'm sharing all of this with you, right, is if your interest rate's coming up to an end, right, and you're going from, so people were on 1.5, maybe 2% is what
Yeah,
they
yeah,
were on,
yeah, yeah.
to jump to,
Even lower more. Like I've got a 1.25%. It's like
yeah,
there was it was as low as that.
mine was 1.49. And that's why I'm so well informed on this, right? Um, is is because and it's crazy, right? I mean, what, touch wood, we'll just have to stop. So we'll just have to tighten our belts like everybody else.
Mhm,
Um, but there's lots of people out there who can't tighten the belt anymore. That's
mhm,
what's sad. That's what's scary. Going back to the conversation we were having last week with Mark, it's like if you are doing all you can, right? If you're doing everything you can, you've got two, three jobs, you're still getting the kids, you're still feeding, you're still doing, you're paying your mortgage and whatever else, and there is nothing else you can do. What a helpless, hopeless position.
mm. It's terrible, terrifying. I think it's yeah, I think something it is scary because I mean, like you said, the difference on a what I didn't can't get my head around. Are you able to maybe explain this somewhat? Let's say that you have a mortgage of £1,000 a
Hmm.
month,
Yeah.
and the interest rate is 2%, for example.
Yeah.
Do you know? And then it goes up from 2% to 3%.
Yeah.
Can you like just roughly, in layman terms, explain the increase of that and why is it so high? Because 1% seems a very small number, but then in actual monetary value, it could be it's quite a lot, isn't it? It's like maybe it's a 1% on a £1,000 mortgage is probably what, a £300 increase from the top of my head without doing any calcs.
Yeah. So the way your mortgage, and I'm not a mortgage advisor, so take everything that I say with a pinch of salt. And this isn't advice or guidance, and I'm not officially regulated, although we as an organization, the SME Centre of Excellence is. But anyway, aside from that, so the way your mortgage is calculated is A, on the amount of your mortgage. So you're absolutely right. You borrow £1,000 and the mortgage rate is 2%. Yeah. So you borrow £1,000, mortgage rate is 2%. So naturally, you would expect to pay sort of, I don't know, £20
Mm,
on that. So
yeah.
technically, you would expect to pay £20 interest on that £1,000 loan. And if that went up by 1%, you would expect to pay £30.
Hmm.
Yeah. As
Yeah.
in, is what you would expect to pay. However, the bit that people don't necessarily take into account or realize is it's that percent of interest on the outstanding amount for the duration of the loan, right?
So if you've got
So
a, so it's
So
not,
if you've got £1,000, if you've got £1,000 mortgage, right, and you've got it over 20 years,
yeah.
and you're paying 2% per year, and it goes up to 3%, and you've got 20 years left on it, or 18 years left, because it might have been a 20-year deal, or you might have 23 years left because it was a 25-year deal, depending upon your age or whatever it is, or if it was 15 or whatever it is, it's that factor that people don't necessarily realize,
Mm,
right? So it's how much is outstanding, and the interest is calculated on for that whole duration. It assumes that you're not going to pay it back earlier, that you're going to have that loan for that period of time. And that's where it's not a simple calculation of 3% on £1,000. It's sort of forecasted, and it's compounded. It's compounded interest, so it compounds year on year on year on year. Um, is what it does. And interestingly, what they'll do is they'll charge you for the duration, anticipating that you're being for that duration. So even though you only have a 2 year, you might agree to take a 2 year fixed deal, is what you might do. But the interest rate and your charges will be based on the duration of your mortgage.
mm. Seems a bit unfair to me.
God, that's life, isn't it? That's why you should have a bank. And the simple thing is, Jaff, give me your deposit, and I'll give you 2-3% on the money you keep with me, and I'm gonna lend it out, and I'm gonna charge other people 5-6%.
Oh, of course.
It's
I
a
mean, banks
great
is
business.
profitable. I mean,
Great business.
it's well, I don't know how yeah, yeah, it's
Isn't it? Is it not a great business?
well, personally, I think it's unethical.
Right. Well,
The banks and
unless you're a
loans,
bank,
I think it's taken a
unless you're a bank, and then it's
I'm
distinctly
all right.
different.
Remember Wonga and all of that over the because they
No,
were
well,
charging
okay, but I think, yeah, and I think the Wonga loan, I thought that was wrong. I think that was exploiting people.
2,500%.
Yeah.
You're worried about 2% and your mortgage going up to from 2% to 4%, but Wonga were charging 2,500%.
Oh, I mean, gosh, Jaff. So when I started working, and I was sort of very independent, and I had my um, daughter, and we lived in a Tyneside flat, and I worked, um, and before I knew it, we didn't have lots of money. We didn't, as in it was the way it was. And I remember um, something breaking or something breaking down or whatever it was. And I remember these payday loan things that you'd get, right? And all of a
Mm,
sudden, I found myself in this cycle of um, you'd write out a check, you'd go and get your money from a check at these payday loans, and they'd charge you, it was like 70-80% interest till whatever. Now, the problem with that is as soon as you get into that cycle, that becomes the norm. So the middle of the month, every single month, I'd go there, and I'd sort of take out a payday loan on a check, give them a check, and then 2 weeks later I'd get paid and have to pay them back because it was a payday loan, as in, and it was a horrible cycle, horrible cycle. Obviously, I mean, I learned quite quickly that was the most stupidest thing in the world, but I found myself in that position,
mm,
and I was earning an all right wage. We didn't starve. We paid the bills, but it didn't take much to actually have that impact. So if you think about people's circumstances, they're quite unique. I mean, earlier on than that, I remember, when you'd go into a store and they'd give you a credit card just like that. It didn't matter. Oh, they just sign here, and it was like whatever. And before you knew it, you had like video recorders, and them were the days or whatever it was. And I found myself that I was like sort of going, oh my gosh, look at how much interest I'm paying on these things and things like that. Now, people are really uncomfortable to have these type of conversations because there's an element of embarrassment. Oh my gosh, I found myself in this position and predicament. It can happen to any of us. It happens to any of us. And I think what's really important is that we feel confident and comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations, and that the right advice is there, but equally the right support. Now, the Wongas and all of these, they took advantage of those that were unable to get credit. Touch wood, fortunate now to be able to get whatever you want, even in whatever circumstance. But that's because spent a lot of years building up that credit worthiness, spent a lot of years, taking out whatever and paying them back and maintaining, budgeting and managing a lifestyle accordingly. It's been hard, but
Mhm.
but touch wood, if I needed something and if anything happened, I wouldn't necessarily have an issue, as opposed to that person that I was talking about who's working 3 jobs, can't pay their bills, has fallen behind in a couple of payments, and now their mortgage rate's going up by 4 or 5%. They're the ones who
Mm.
need that support. They're the ones who need,
Yeah.
the government should be introducing an element of um, you know what, not first time buyers, which I think is great, but I think if you're suffering, right, there should be emergency interest rates or no interest rates or whatever it is for individuals um, that genuinely are experiencing challenges, because we're going to see a lot more of them with the interest rates the way they are.
Yeah. It's going to be very, very tough year
It
ahead.
is very tough. So,
But
so, so talking about toughness, Jaff, um, very briefly, because it's important for us to get this the business topic of the week in, and I now have that, and I have my script and everything else in the way that we should. So the business topic of the week, Jaff, interestingly, is scaling up. So if you're growing, challenges and opportunities for small businesses. So scaling up a small business is a significant milestone on a journey to growth and expansion. It's a time of exciting opportunities and daunting challenges as businesses strive to capitalize on their successes and take operations to the next level. Before starting to scale, though, it is important to understand the challenges that many scaling businesses face. Resource constraints, what are the primary challenges? Companies, businesses, when scaling is managing limited resources. You require infrastructure, investment, operational activities. I feel as if we've covered this previously, Jack. Do you
mm,
not?
yeah, I think we did them all. We did that. We did that a couple of weeks ago, I
Oh,
think. Something similar.
yeah, we did. We definitely did. Anyway, the challenges are still there and they still exist. We'll. I mean, Jeff,
I think
what was your biggest challenge? Let's just get into some actual data and details. What was your biggest challenge when you went from one restaurant to two to three
um,
to whatever?
I think the biggest challenge always is ensuring that when you expand, the standards still remain in your from one venue. When you go into the second one, it doesn't affect the standard and the product in the first one. So I think that's the biggest challenge. I think for us,
Mm,
fortunately, we managed to acquire sites that weren't doing very well at all. So we managed to get
mm,
them for a very low price, and then added our kind of you know ideas to it to develop it. But I think that's one of the biggest things. I think it's a matter of expanding, but being able to grow without having an impact on the product standards of your first operation or your second operation. And if you can maintain that, I think, and you're confident that you've got a product that is unique for that city, for that region, for that market, then I think expansion. We've actually been talking about this a lot internally.
mm,
Um, just to give an example, my brother who's based in London, he's got a commercial property client, and he's a Pakistani fella, and he's worth 2 or 3 billion pounds, billions.
mm,
And then he's his dad's in his late kind of 60s. He's in his kind of late 40s, and my brother sat with him just to have a conversation. He said, "Hey, I just want to do. Would you mind if I ask you a curious question? Obviously, you've got a few billion quid's worth of assets, and where does it stop? Do you not feel that you've kind of you've got there and you've got enough?" And then he said, "Do you know what? It's not really about wanting to have that desire to keep on buying more and buying more and buying more. It's more about the fact that when we started, we actually put a business framework in place. So I've got a property acquisition specialist who's part of our business model, and his job is to constantly acquire new properties and look at the profitability and A, B, C, and D. So our business model is based on that, and our dynamics in place within the business is to go and achieve that. So that's just our business, and it's not that we want one. I can't have, am I going to be able to see all my sites in A, B, C, and D? But so once you get to a certain level and you're successful, maybe those that expand, if you've got the right infrastructure in place within your organization, then I think expansion is going to be I don't think there's any harm with it. It's a good thing, as long as you don't. You need the right infrastructure. I think that's one of the big things.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think you're far more effective in that regard. But biggest challenge is the dependency on us. Whether that's in the front or behind the scenes or whatever it is, and picking up on that story that you've just shared, it very much is a case of getting the right skills, getting the right people. The most successful organizations and individuals, they have a routine, they have processes that are effective, but above all else, they have the right people with the right mindset. So it's like, okay, I'm going to bring in somebody to deal with those things, and they're effective in dealing with those things. I don't need to micromanage them. I don't need to, like, so this is how you get out of bed and do those, so initiative and whatever else. But they've got those skills, right? So and the other thing is, it's about the money. Right? So vanity is a great thing. We've got 20 sites, we've got 30 sites, we've got 50, we've got 100 sites, right? But unless you manage and maintain the bottom line and focus on the pennies, like truly focus on the pennies, like how many hand towels are being used, how many times how many sort of steps are people going up and down, what else can we do, how many times is the elevator being used, and how much electricity does that take, and whatever else, because actually the more data you have, the better your decisions. If you're just basing it on, well, I spent this much last week, I made that much, I'm doing all right, you'll never effectively scale or realize your ambition. And so getting into the data and the detail, having an accountant scrutinize and analyze everything, getting in cost reduction specialists and experts, understanding the workflow of your organization. I regularly observe, because it's this is what I do, is advise businesses and organizations on how to fix things or make them better. But it's amazing how much I'll sit and observe how people come in, what time they come in to a business organization, what they do when they come in, how ready they are. And I'm not talking about here. I'm talking about sort of shops and retail and whatever else, and what are people doing as they're stood around, and because you can introduce incredible efficiencies, right? I mean, British Airways reduced one olive in their sort of premier economy class, and in their business class, one olive reduced, right, Jeff? And they saved tens of millions of pounds. One olive. How many people do you think noticed that one olive?
No, not many people at all. I wish I could do that by reducing a couple of olives.
Well, I think you should. Yeah. because the amount you,
You want to
but
give, we
actually
want to give,
your
we want
markup,
to give
you
more
have
olives
golden
for
olives is
customer.
what you have.
We want to
Yeah.
give more olives for customer experience and enjoyment and satisfaction.
Yeah, but I mean, gosh, their olives weren't retailing for like 50 quid an olive, were they? You know, there's a big difference. But
Yeah.
they were giving them away. You know, there's a slight difference. But anyway, my point being is micro changes, right? What's the parcel delivery, the brown UPS or whatever it is, right? They only take right turns. Their vehicles in America only take right turns because they realized, right, cutting across the traffic or left turns, whatever side it is. But they realized cutting across the traffic cost them more in petrol and diesel than going slightly longer routes, because the longer routes were quicker routes because they never ever cut across the traffic.
Mm.
These type of changes transform organizations, small micro changes that you just don't even consider, yeah, is the thing. So it's like, anyway, if you're scaling, get down to brass nuts, you is what you need to do, and tax and whatever else, and just understand. Can can your customer service go up if it was methodical? It's in a restaurant, you've got 3, 4 people serving in a restaurant. Can you make it so that it becomes a bit more methodical and the customer experience is enhanced? So what do I mean by that? You actually, rather than people looking to see if someone's finished or looking to see whether someone needs their attention, just periodically every 10 minutes, just sort of visiting each of the tables, right? Not to actually interfere, because the worst thing I like hate, one of the things I hate is someone keep coming over. Oh, is everything all right? Is everything all right? Bloody hell, man, I'm just trying to have a conversation. But but more doing it authentically, more doing it, methodically, so there'll never be a period of time where someone feels as if they've waited too long for either service or for more food or drinks. So there's some top tips. I charge lots of money for that advice that you're
No,
getting here.
I think we're all grateful about that, and we can hopefully
And
go
so, well, obviously,
implement them.
you're living it, you're experiencing it, you're an incredibly successful entrepreneur. Yeah, I make reference to you all of the time, and you haven't done this because you don't know what you're doing. You're doing this because you do. So,
Well,
top tip before we go, Jeff.
keep on moving forward. I think keep on developing. No matter where you are, I think we've got this thing. You need to elevate always. That's what I try and tell my team.
What? Wonderful. Anyway, we're coming up to the end of the show. Funnily enough, we didn't mention football, which is
I know.
outrageous.
Well, we're getting some players back, Ammar. Jolik's back. Isak is back. I think Nick Pope is not that far away, which is amazing if we can get him back in a couple of weeks.
Him.
Oh, God.
We need him.
If we can get through, beat Blackburn. Look, I think there might be a silver lining to our season. I really hope that there is. Imagine if we win the FA Cup. Oh, and then we'll put a run together. And some of the teams above us, they lose a few. You never know what could happen. We could still get into the top 5, hopefully. That's what my dream is. Top 5 finish.
For the community, by the community. Spice
Amazing.
FM 98.8.
I'll be dialing in from Saudi next week.
Shamima Begum has lost a court of appeal challenge over the removal of her British citizenship.